What's up, suckers? My name's XgoSolo, and the words that are about to leave my mouth are considered blasphemy in the Honkai Star Rail community. Today, I am here with a heavy heart to let you all know that JingLiu is no longer a character who is worth pulling. This is not a belated April Fool's Day joke, and I am being 100% serious, because with the advent of new characters coming in 2.0, I'd wager that by the start of 3.0, JingLiu will be entirely outclassed. And today, I am here to explain exactly why. If you enjoy these types of videos, like my content, or just want to punch me in the face with what I just said, then do me a favor and like and subscribe. And without wasting any more of your time, let's get straight into it. JingLiu is the strongest character in the game. This was a sentiment that everybody echoed back during 1.4 when she released, and at least to some extent it still is to this day. JingLiu is a top 3 DPS, and the main reason behind this is just how ridiculous her self-enforced buffs are. The biggest pain point you'll see with a lot of DPSs is something known as crit value, with the breakpoint in crit value for a majority of characters being 340, 70% crit rate, 200 crit damage. Upon activating something known as her transmigration state, JingLiu's crit rate immediately increases by 50%, which is a ungodly amount for a character who's already as powerful as she was. In addition to this, the only caveat for activating this effect was basically just playing a DPS the way they're designed to be. Already, JingLiu was looking to be a very viable character. Pair this with the fact that her best in slot relics were all ice, she doesn't need an energy regeneration rope, and World 7 is where you get her best in slot gear, and all of a sudden you have a character who's not only impeccably easy to build, but totally realistic for people who have just been playing the game for any period of time. Immediately, videos started coming out praising just how good this character was. And it wasn't just guides either. Commentary channels were using JingLiu as an example of how power scaling in this game is starting to get out of hand. And this was a fact that only got worse once people realized that Blade and JingLiu on the same team had an ungodly amount of synergy. JingLiu well and truly was at the top of the world, and it seemed as though she was undefeatable. But flash forward to 2.0, and here comes none other than Sparkle. You see, back when JingLiu came out, there was a definitive meta in the game, and that of the hyper carry destruction. DOT had yet to been fully fleshed out, Ranmei wasn't there to lead the charge with dual DPS, and follow-up attacks were a fucking joke. Therefore, a lot of people ended up running hyper carry destruction thanks to its flexibility and ease of use. And of the two characters who existed in this bracket, there was DHIL and JingLiu. The main argument that was being raised at the time is that DHIL didn't have very much flexibility, and while he did a lot more damage in one move, JingLiu did more damage in one cycle. This was the biggest argument in favor of JingLiu. But upon the release of Sparkle, things rapidly changed. No longer was skill points an issue with DHIL, and now having the ability to both run attack boots and still get turn-in semi-regularly meant that DHIL was entirely outperforming her. And while all of this was happening, the meta simultaneously began to shift away from destruction hyper carries. Here comes the follow-up squad consisting of Ranmei, Dr. Ratio, Topaz, and Avengerine. Meanwhile, DOT comps consisting of Black Swan, Kafka, Ranmei, and Huahua are entirely sweeping all forms of content. Then, with the addition of 2.1, Acheron came out, who is effectively a destruction character who doesn't need harmony. Therefore, by using Acheron, you save yourself precious space for your first destruction team. But everything I'm saying right now has nothing to do with why JingLiu is necessarily worse. Sure, the meta is shifting around her, but she's still just as good as she was before. If anything, now you have more flexibility when it comes to using her, right? Well, as it turns out, flexibility was the one thing that JingLiu lacked. You see, there are two types of character scaling in Honkai Star Rail: vertical and horizontal. Horizontal characters are characters that generally are bad on release or agreed upon to not be that great, but as time goes on, they only get better. Characters who follow this horizontal scaling consist of Silverwolf, Acheron, Dr. Ratio, and Topaz. And while yes, all of these characters were never considered to be outright awful, the fact of the matter is, as time goes on, they're only going to get better. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, you have vertically scaling characters who start off really fucking good and leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else, but as time goes on, they lack the flexibility to continue growing. And who else is leading the forefront in this charge than the woman of the hour herself, JingLiu? You see, JingLiu had a bunch of self-imposed buffs, and that in of itself could never be questioned. What she fundamentally lacked was the ability to push herself past her own limitations. There is absolutely nothing that can be done that can make JingLiu any better than she already is, and that is a fact that has remained since the moment she released, with those teams either being a Blade JingLiu dual DPS or a JingLiu Bronya hyper carry. So that just begs the question, why can she not grow past her current limits? Well, simply put, she just doesn't have any gimmicks that other characters can facilitate. Realistically, the only way that you can make a JingLiu team more powerful than it is now is to have a Ice Harmony character with single target action forward buffs and a signature trace that gives them the unique ability to buff Ice allies based on how many other Ice allies you have on the field. If that sounds like a very specific niche, that is because that's exactly what that is. And until the day comes where JingLiu has that opportunity provided to her, she's pretty much hit her peak. The current JingLiu that we're looking at now is best in slot on a Blade JingLiu Luocha Ruanmei team. But one interesting thing about this team is that JingLiu is merely just doing damage to the entire team in order to help Blade get his stacks off. If another destruction character comes out who can do that, but they do more damage, JingLiu is going to get kicked off the squad. Meanwhile, Blade, Luocha, and Ruanmei on that team are completely irreplaceable. Luocha is the only way you're going to be able to keep a team alive if they're constantly killing each other, and Ruanmei is the best dual DPS enabler in the game. With all of that being said, it's very hard to justify pulling JingLiu now of all times when the meta is already pretty much set in stone around her. And as if all of that wasn't enough, there is still one major reason why you probably don't want to pull JingLiu, and that is her viability in Swarm Disaster, Golden Gears, and Simulated Universe. Or I guess I should be saying her lack of viability, because JingLiu is arguably one of the worst characters to run in that game mode. While our princess may be the best at what she does when it comes to MLC, Swarm is an entirely different ballpark that plays by an entirely different meta. In fact, March 7th is one of the best characters in that entire game mode due to the fact that she benefits from every path except Nihility. And when you put it like that, a lot of issues start coming up. You see, the threat of being one-shot doesn't really exist anywhere with the exception of Swarm, Golden Gears, and Simulated Universe. And it is more prevalent there than any other game mode, with the later enemies outright being capable of one-shotting a Fu Xuan despite all of her damage mitigation. Now you may be wondering why that matters, and that's because healing in Simulated Universe and Swarm has infinitely less value than shielding. Because while yes, you may be able to heal off all that damage you just took, ain't no amount of healing in this world is going to save you from being one-shot. And you have to run a healer when using JingLiu because she is constantly and very slowly killing your entire team. So now you are met with a very unique scenario where you're going to have to take off one of your Harmony characters in order to run both a healer and a shielder. Which, to be fair, actually isn't a bad idea, especially with all the buffs Preservation and Abundance provide. But what's not so great is just how little benefits JingLiu gets from pretty much all of the classes the game mode has to offer. In my 6 months of experience in running JingLiu through those game modes, the thing that she benefits from the most is Hunt. The Hunt path allows her to get a bunch of consecutive turns, and mixing that with the ability to cast ultimates more regularly and constantly having enemies with ice weaknesses means that you will pretty much never get hit. But in the event that you do get hit in the later waves, you are outright going to die. Getting past Swarm Disaster 4 with JingLiu is going to be a chore. It's possible, but it's not really likely. Now, getting past Simulated Universe and Swarm 5 with JingLiu and a healer is damn near never going to happen. In fact, despite all of my runs in Swarm over the span of 3 months, I was never able to clear it with JingLiu and a healer. However, the second I got DHIL, I was able to steamroll the entire game mode in less than 7 minutes. And this is because when running the Hunt path, you are often overexposed and therefore will immediately get eviscerated the second an enemy breathes on you. Now contrast this with other DPSs like Acheron, who benefit immensely from Erudition and Nihility, or hell, even DHIL, who has an entire path in the form of Propagation specifically dedicated to him and QQ. And now you're starting to realize why JingLiu is playing soccer in a football field. Sure, she might be able to score that goal, but it's going to take infinitely more work for her than pretty much any other DPS in the game. So from the lack of growth and lack of viability in major endgame, can I genuinely say JingLiu is worth pulling now? I'd honestly say no. Especially with Sam right around the corner, you'd be better off just waiting for that DPS and then pulling him then. And if Sam doesn't seem like they're quite your speed, just go for Acheron, bro. She's definitely not the only character from 1.0 who's starting to have a bit of a crisis, with Luocha and Fu Xuan likely being very shortly behind her, but those are videos for another day.